Captain James Richardson had been protecting the royal family for 12 years. Every morning, he walked the same path around Kensington Palace grounds, checking every corner, every shadow, every face that didn't belong. His sharp eyes missed nothing. Today felt different, though he couldn't explain why. The October morning air was crisp as Captain Richardson made his rounds. Prince Louis, now 5 years old, was scheduled for his weekly visit to the nearby children's hospital. It was a routine that had become precious to both the young prince and the sick children who waited eagerly for his arrival every Tuesday morning. As Richardson checked the security perimeter, something caught his attention. A man in a worn brown coat stood near the palace gates, pretending to read a newspaper. Nothing unusual about that. Tourists and royal watchers gathered here daily. But this man was different. He kept glancing at his watch and looking toward the service entrance where royal vehicles typically departed. Richardson had seen thousands of royal watchers over the years. Most were harmless fans hoping for a glimpse of their favorite royals. Some were photographers trying to get exclusive shots. A few were protesters making political statements. But this man displayed none of those behaviors. His posture was tense, calculated, professional. The stranger appeared to be in his 30s, average height with dark hair. His clothes were unremarkable, the kind that helped someone blend into any crowd. But his shoes caught Richardson's trained eye. They were expensive, well-maintained, the kind worn by someone who valued mobility and comfort over style. Not typical tourist footwear. Richardson spoke quietly into his radio. "Control, this is Richardson. I have a potential person of interest near the main gates. Male, approximately 35, brown coat, carrying a newspaper. Request background check on facial recognition." The response came back quickly. "Richardson, we're running the scan now. Continue observation but maintain distance." The stranger folded his newspaper and began walking slowly along the palace perimeter. Richardson followed at a distance, using his knowledge of the grounds to stay hidden while maintaining visual contact. Years of training had taught him to trust his instincts, and, right now, every instinct screamed that this man posed a threat. As they moved, Richardson noticed more concerning details. The stranger knew exactly which security cameras to avoid, taking paths that kept him in blind spots. He carried himself like someone with military or police training, alert, controlled, purposeful. Most telling of all, he seemed to know the palace routine better than most tourists ever could. Prince Louis was scheduled to leave in 30 minutes. The 5-year-old prince had been looking forward to this hospital visit all week. He had personally chosen gifts for several of the long-term patients and had been practicing magic tricks to entertain the younger children. The thought of disappointing those sick children because of a security threat made Richardson's jaw clench with determination. The stranger stopped near a coffee cart positioned strategically to overlook the service entrance. He ordered a coffee but barely touched it, using the purchase as an excuse to linger in the perfect surveillance position. Richardson watched as the man's eyes tracked every vehicle entering and leaving the palace grounds. "Control, target has positioned himself with clear sightlines to the service entrance. This is not random tourist behavior. Recommend we consider alternative departure routes for today's scheduled visit." "Copy that, Richardson. We're still running identification. Can you get closer for better photos?" Richardson knew he had to be careful. If this man was indeed a professional threat, getting too close might spook him into action or cause him to abandon his current plan only to try again later under different circumstances. But they needed more information to assess the level of danger. Using a maintenance shed as cover, Richardson managed to get within 20 feet of the stranger. From this distance, he could see the man more clearly. There was something familiar about his face, though Richardson couldn't place where he might have seen him before. The man's hands moved nervously, and he kept checking a small device in his pocket, possibly a phone or communication device. Suddenly, the stranger's demeanor changed. He straightened up, became more alert, and began moving toward the service entrance with purpose. Richardson realized that someone had likely just informed the man that Prince Louis's departure was imminent. "Control, target is moving toward service entrance."
We may have a compromised communication channel. Someone is feeding this individual real-time information about royal movements. The implications hit Richardson like a physical blow. If there was a security leak within their own ranks, the threat level had just escalated dramatically. Not only was Prince Louis potentially in immediate danger, but future security protocols could be compromised until they identified and eliminated the source of the leak. Richardson had to make a split-second decision. Protocol dictated that he should maintain surveillance until backup arrived and the target could be safely apprehended. But Prince Louis's vehicle would be emerging from the service entrance in less than 10 minutes, and this stranger was positioning himself perfectly for whatever action he planned to take. The stranger pulled out his phone and made a brief call. Richardson couldn't hear the words, but the body language was clear. Final preparations for some kind of operation were being confirmed. Time was running out. As Richardson watched, the stranger reached into his coat and adjusted something. The movement was subtle, but Richardson's trained eye caught it immediately. The man was carrying something concealed under his jacket, something he was ensuring was easily accessible. Richardson's mind raced through possibilities. Was this an assassination attempt? A kidnapping plot? Some kind of surveillance operation by a foreign intelligence service? Whatever the stranger's intentions, Richardson couldn't allow him to get any closer to Prince Louis. The sound of engines starting echoed from the service garage. Prince Louis's convoy was preparing to depart. The stranger heard it too and began walking more quickly toward the exit point, his hand moving instinctively toward whatever he carried beneath his coat. Richardson knew he was out of time for backup to arrive and handle this situation through normal channels. In less than 5 minutes, Prince Louis would emerge in his vehicle, potentially driving directly into whatever trap this stranger had prepared. The weight of protecting the young prince's life fell squarely on Richardson's shoulders. The stranger positioned himself behind a decorative pillar that would provide perfect cover while giving him a clear view of any vehicle exiting the service entrance. His positioning was too perfect to be coincidental. This man had clearly studied the palace layout and departure procedures extensively. Richardson checked his weapon and radio one final time. Whatever happened in the next few minutes would likely determine whether Prince Louis made it safely to his hospital visit or became the victim of whatever plot this stranger had orchestrated. The captain had sworn an oath to protect the royal family with his life, and he had never meant those words more seriously than he did at this moment. The stranger looked at his watch one final time, then focused his complete attention on the service entrance. His hand moved to rest inside his coat, ready to act the moment Prince Louis's vehicle appeared. Richardson realized that waiting any longer might mean the difference between preventing a tragedy and responding to one. Drawing upon 12 years of experience and training, Richardson began moving into position to intercept the threat before it could reach Prince Louis. Whatever the stranger had planned, it would have to go through Richardson first. The young prince's safety depended entirely on what happened in the next crucial minutes, and Richardson was determined not to let down the royal family or the nation that trusted him to keep their beloved prince safe. Richardson moved swiftly but quietly toward the stranger's position. His years of military training before joining the Royal Protection Unit had taught him how to approach a potential threat without triggering a violent response. Every step was calculated, every movement designed to give him the maximum advantage if this situation turned dangerous. The stranger remained focused on the service entrance, apparently unaware that he was being watched and approached. Richardson could now see that the man's right hand rested inside his coat, clearly gripping something. The captain's heart rate increased as he realized how close they were to a potential catastrophe. Prince Louis's laughter echoed faintly from inside the palace as he prepared for his departure. The innocent sound made Richardson's determination even stronger. This 5-year-old boy represented hope and joy for millions of people around the world. Richardson would not allow that light to be extinguished on his watch. As Richardson closed the distance to 15 feet, the stranger suddenly tensed. Something had alerted him, perhaps the change in ambient noise as Richardson approached, or maybe just the instincts of someone trained in dangerous work. The man began to turn around slowly, his hand tightening on whatever he carried beneath his coat. "That's far enough," Richardson called out firmly, his own weapon drawn but held low and ready. "Keep your hands where I can see them." The stranger froze, then slowly raised his hands, though his right hand remained inside his coat. "There's been a misunderstanding, officer," the man said in a calm voice with a slight accent that Richardson couldn't immediately identify. "I'm just a tourist taking photographs." "Tourists don't position themselves to avoid security cameras," Richardson replied, stepping closer. "Tourists don't study departure schedules and security procedures. And tourists certainly don't carry concealed weapons while surveilling royal movements." The stranger's eyes darted toward the service entrance, then back to Richardson. "You're making a serious mistake. I'm not who you think I am."
"Then, you won't mind explaining who you are and what you're doing here," Richardson said, his weapon now raised and aimed directly at the stranger. "And you'll do it while keeping your hands visible and moving very slowly away from whatever you're carrying." For a moment, the two men stared at each other in tense silence.
Richardson could hear the engines of Prince Louis's convoy getting louder as the vehicles moved closer to the exit.
Time was running out, and this stranger showed no signs of backing down or complying with Richardson's commands. "Look," the stranger said, his voice taking on an urgent tone, "you need to listen to me very carefully. Prince Louis is in immediate danger, but not from me.
I'm here to prevent an attack, not carry one out." Richardson's mind raced.
This could be a standard deflection tactic used by criminals when caught claiming to be trying to prevent the very crime they were about to commit. But something in the stranger's voice and body language suggested he might be telling the truth.
The problem was that Richardson couldn't afford to guess wrong when Prince Louis's life hung in the balance. "If you're here to help, then identify yourself properly," Richardson demanded.
"Show me credentials, explain your presence through official channels, and do it right now before that convoy reaches this exit." The stranger glanced toward the service entrance again, his frustration evident.
"There isn't time for bureaucracy. In approximately 2 minutes, Prince Louis's vehicle is going to pass through those gates."
50 meters down the street, there's a delivery truck parked in what appears to be a routine roadwork zone.
That truck contains enough explosives to level half this block.
Richardson felt his blood run cold, but he kept his weapon trained on the stranger.
"How do you know this?"
"Because I've been tracking the terrorist cell planning this attack for the past 6 months, the stranger replied urgently.
"My name is Agent David Sullivan, and I work for an international counter-terrorism task force."
The attack is scheduled for exactly 11:15, when Prince Louis's convoy passes the fake construction site. The sound of vehicles moving through the palace garage grew louder. Richardson had to make a decision that could determine whether he was preventing an attack or enabling one. Every instinct told him that something about this situation didn't add up the way most security threats did.
"If you're really a counter-terrorism agent, why didn't you coordinate with palace security?"
Richardson asked, though he was already beginning to lower his weapon slightly. "Because we have evidence that someone inside your security apparatus has been feeding information to the terrorist cell," Sullivan replied. "Every detail of Prince Louis's schedule, route planning, and security procedures has been compromised. We couldn't risk official channels without knowing who the leak was." Richardson's mind flashed back to how perfectly the stranger, Sullivan, had positioned himself to observe royal movements, and how someone had clearly been feeding him real-time information about Prince Louis's departure. If Sullivan was telling the truth, then Richardson had just been watching a counter-surveillance operation, not a surveillance operation.
"What's your plan?" Richardson asked, making the split-second decision to trust this stranger who might be the only thing standing between Prince Louis and a terrorist attack.
Sullivan pulled his hand slowly from inside his coat, revealing not a weapon but a small electronic device.
"This is a signal jammer. The bomb in that truck is triggered by a cell phone call. If we can disrupt the signal at the critical moment, the device won't detonate when Prince Louis's convoy passes through the kill zone." The convoy engines were now very close to the exit. Richardson could see the lead security vehicle beginning to emerge from the service entrance. In less than 60 seconds, Prince Louis would be traveling directly toward what Sullivan claimed was a massive explosive device.
"There's still time to change the route," Richardson said, reaching for his radio. "No," Sullivan said urgently. "If they abort this operation, the terrorist cell will just try again later, possibly somewhere we can't predict or prevent." This might be our only chance to catch them in the act and roll up their entire network. But we need Prince Louis to be safe while we do it. Richardson realized that Sullivan was asking him to make an impossible choice: trust a complete stranger with Prince Louis's life, or potentially allow terrorists to escape and try again under circumstances where they might succeed. The weight of protecting not just Prince Louis but potentially preventing future attacks fell on Richardson's shoulders. Prince Louis's vehicle emerged from the service entrance, followed closely by 2 security vehicles. The 5-year-old prince was visible through the reinforced windows, excitedly pointing at something outside and chatting with his protection officer. The sight of the innocent child strengthened Richardson's resolve. "What do you need me to do?" Richardson asked Sullivan. Sullivan looked surprised that Richardson was willing to trust him, but quickly focused on the urgent situation. "I need you to contact your command center and have them monitor the delivery truck 50 meters east of the main gates. The moment Prince Louis's convoy passes safely, they need to move in and secure the vehicle before the terrorists realize their plan has failed." Richardson spoke rapidly into his radio while keeping his eyes on Sullivan and the departing convoy. "Control, this is Richardson. We have a potential explosive device in a delivery truck 50 meters east of main gates. I need immediate response team deployment and convoy monitoring. Treat this as a credible, imminent threat." The response came back immediately. "Richardson, what's your source on this intelligence?" Richardson looked at Sullivan, who was now activating the signal jamming device. "Source is a counter-terrorism agent who's been tracking this plot. I'm treating his information as credible based on tactical assessment." Prince Louis's convoy was now passing through the main gates, heading directly toward the reported location of the explosive device. Sullivan held the signal jammer high, his face tense with concentration as he monitored the electronic display showing various communication frequencies being blocked. "The convoy is approaching the target zone now," Sullivan said. "If I'm right, someone is about to try making a call to detonate that device. If I'm wrong." He didn't finish the sentence, but both men knew what failure would mean. Richardson watched through binoculars as Prince Louis's convoy approached the construction zone where Sullivan claimed the bomb was hidden. The delivery truck sat innocently among orange traffic cones and construction barriers, looking exactly like hundreds of similar roadwork setups throughout London. "There," Sullivan said suddenly, pointing at a figure emerging from a nearby building. "That's one of them. He's got a phone in his hand." Richardson could see a man in work clothes pulling out a cell phone and beginning to dial. The timing was perfect. Prince Louis's convoy was just entering the kill zone where the maximum damage would be inflicted. Everything Sullivan had predicted was happening exactly as he described. The terrorist pressed the call button on his phone, but nothing happened. He looked confused, checked his phone signal, and tried again. Sullivan's jamming device was working, preventing the call from going through to trigger the explosive device. Prince Louis's convoy passed safely through the construction zone and continued toward the children's hospital. The young prince remained completely unaware of how close he had come to being the victim of a terrorist attack, continuing his excited chatter about the magic tricks he planned to perform for the sick children. But Richardson and Sullivan both knew that their work was just beginning. They had prevented the immediate attack, but now they had to capture the terrorists before they realized what had happened and disappeared forever. The terrorist with the phone was now frantically trying to make his call work, pressing buttons repeatedly and shaking the device in frustration. Richardson could see the man's growing panic as he realized something had gone wrong with his carefully planned attack. This was the moment when everything would either fall perfectly into place or spiral completely out of control. Sullivan continued monitoring his jamming device while speaking quickly to Richardson. "We need your response teams to move now, while they're still confused about why the detonation didn't work. In about 30 seconds, they're going to realize they've been compromised and start running." Richardson was already coordinating with his command center. "Control, we have visual confirmation of terrorist activity at the construction site. One suspect is attempting to trigger a device with a cell phone. We need immediate tactical response and area lockdown." "Richardson, are you certain about this intelligence?" came the reply. "We're about to deploy significant resources based on the word of an unidentified individual." Richardson looked at Sullivan, who was now pointing at two more figures emerging from different positions around the construction site. All three men were showing signs of confusion and alarm as their communications failed and their carefully orchestrated attack fell apart. "Control, I have visual confirmation of multiple suspects displaying behavior consistent with failed terrorist operation," Richardson reported. "Recommend immediate deployment and ask questions later. Prince Louis is safe, but we have a narrow window to capture these individuals." Within minutes, unmarked police vehicles began converging on the construction site from multiple directions. Richardson felt a mixture of relief and anxiety as he watched the operation unfold. If Sullivan was telling the truth, they were about to capture a dangerous terrorist cell. If Sullivan was lying or mistaken, Richardson had just authorized a massive police action based on the word of a complete stranger. Sullivan was now monitoring different frequencies on his device. "They're trying to use backup communication channels," he explained to Richardson. "But none of their equipment is working properly. That's buying us the time we need to close the net around them." The terrorist who had been trying to make the phone call suddenly threw his device to the ground and began running toward a nearby alley. Richardson watched as plainclothes police officers emerged from concealed positions to intercept him. The man realized he was trapped and raised his hands in surrender, though his face showed more anger than fear. "That's their demolitions expert," Sullivan said, pointing at the captured terrorist. "He's the one who built the device and was responsible for triggering it. Getting him alive is crucial because he can lead us to their bomb-making facilities and other planned attacks." A second terrorist tried to blend into a group of genuine construction workers, but the police had been briefed to detain everyone in the immediate area. Richardson could see the man's tension as officers approached, and the moment when he decided to make a break for it. He didn't get far before being tackled and subdued by two officers who had been positioned to cut off exactly that escape route. The third terrorist, however, had managed to slip away during the initial confusion. Sullivan was tracking him on his device, which apparently had capabilities beyond simple signal jamming. "He's heading toward the underground station," Sullivan reported. "If he makes it to the trains, we'll lose him in the tunnel system." Richardson immediately relayed this information to his command center, requesting that transit police be alerted to watch for the fleeing suspect. But he was also becoming more curious about exactly who Sullivan was and what kind of equipment he was carrying that could track individual people through city streets. "Agent Sullivan," Richardson said as they watched the police operation continue, "I need to know exactly who you work for and how you came by this intelligence. My superiors are going to want detailed answers, and, frankly, so do I." Sullivan paused in his monitoring to look directly at Richardson. "I work for a joint intelligence task force that was created after the terrorist attacks in Paris 3 years ago. We track cells that specifically target high-profile individuals and public events. This particular group has been planning attacks on royal family members across Europe. Why wasn't British intelligence informed about this threat?" Richardson asked. "Because we discovered that several European security services have been infiltrated by sympathizers who pass information to terrorist organizations," Sullivan replied. "We've been operating under deep cover protocols to avoid compromising ongoing operations." The explanation made sense, but Richardson still felt uneasy about the entire situation. Sullivan's equipment was too sophisticated for a standard counter-terrorism agent, and his knowledge of palace security procedures was surprisingly detailed. Either he was exactly who he claimed to be, or he was part of something much more complex than a simple terrorist plot. Police officers were now approaching the delivery truck that supposedly contained the bomb. Richardson watched nervously as the bomb disposal unit began their careful examination of the vehicle. If Sullivan was wrong about the explosive device, this entire operation would be revealed as a massive false alarm based on Richardson's decision to trust a mysterious stranger. "There," Sullivan said, pointing at his monitoring device. "They've confirmed the presence of a large improvised explosive device in the truck's cargo area. Enough plastique to have destroyed Prince Louis's entire convoy and most of the surrounding buildings." Richardson felt a wave of relief mixed with horror. Relief that his decision to trust Sullivan had been correct, and horror at how close Prince Louis had come to being killed along with dozens of innocent bystanders. The 5-year-old prince was probably at the children's hospital right now, performing magic tricks and bringing joy to sick children, completely unaware that his life had been saved by a chance encounter between a vigilant guard and a mysterious agent.
Sullivan's device began beeping urgently. The third terrorist just used an emergency communication protocol, he reported.
He's contacting someone higher up in the organization to report the failed attack.
Can you track that communication? Richardson asked.
Better than that, Sullivan replied. I can trace it back to its source. This failed attack might actually help us identify the entire leadership structure of this terrorist network. Richardson realized that what had started as a routine security patrol had turned into one of the most significant counter-terrorism operations in recent British history. Prince Louis was safe, but the implications of this plot extended far beyond a single attack on one member of the royal family. The bomb disposal experts were now working to carefully disarm the device in the delivery truck. Richardson could see the concentration on their faces as they dealt with what was apparently a sophisticated and powerful explosive. The fact that Prince Louis had passed within meters of this device without knowing it existed made Richardson's hands shake slightly as he considered how differently this day could have ended. Sullivan was now coordinating with the police teams through his own communication system, providing real-time intelligence about the terrorists' movements and helping to guide the ongoing manhunt for the escaped suspect. Richardson was impressed by the efficiency of the operation, but also concerned about how much Sullivan seemed to know about police procedures and capabilities. Agent Sullivan, Richardson said carefully, I'm going to need you to come with me for a full debriefing with my superiors. There are going to be a lot of questions about how you knew about this plot and why you chose to handle it this way. Sullivan nodded without taking his eyes off his monitoring device.
I understand, Captain Richardson.
But first, we need to make sure we've captured all the active members of this cell. The third terrorist just made another call, and I think he's trying to activate a backup plan.
Richardson felt his stomach drop. What kind of backup plan?
Unknown at this point, Sullivan replied grimly. But terrorist cells usually have contingencies in place for when their primary operations fail.
Prince Louis might still be in danger, just from a different direction than we originally anticipated.
The successful prevention of one attack had apparently opened the door to an even more complex and dangerous situation. Richardson realized that his morning patrol had stumbled into something much larger than a single terrorist plot. They had uncovered a network with multiple plans and backup strategies designed to ensure they eventually succeeded in their goal of harming the royal family. As police sirens continued to sound throughout the area and specialized teams worked to secure the explosive device, Richardson and Sullivan prepared for what might be an even more challenging phase of protecting Prince Louis from threats they didn't yet understand. Sullivan's monitoring device was now showing multiple active communication channels as the terrorist network scrambled to respond to their failed attack. Richardson watched the digital displays with growing concern, realizing that preventing one bomb plot had apparently triggered a much larger operational response from what was clearly a sophisticated organization. Captain, Sullivan said urgently, we have a problem.
The escaped terrorist just activated what appears to be a secondary target protocol. They're not giving up on attacking Prince Louis, they're just changing their approach. Richardson immediately got on his radio. Control, this is Richardson. We need immediate status update on Prince Louis's current location and security detail. We have intelligence suggesting additional threats may be active. The response came back quickly. Prince Louis is currently at St. Mary's Children's Hospital as scheduled. He's in the pediatric ward with his standard protection detail. Why, what's the situation?
Richardson looked at Sullivan, who was frantically working with his device to decode the intercepted communications.
What exactly are we dealing with?
The backup plan appears to target the hospital, Sullivan explained. They knew there was a possibility their primary attack might fail, so they positioned assets at Prince Louis's destination as well.
We didn't just prevent one attack, we forced them to activate a secondary attack that could be even more dangerous. The implications hit Richardson immediately. A hospital full of sick children was an even more vulnerable target than a royal convoy on a public street. If terrorists attacked while Prince Louis was visiting young patients, the casualty count could be devastating, and the psychological impact on the nation would be enormous. How long do we have?
Richardson asked Sullivan while simultaneously coordinating an emergency response through his own channels. Sullivan studied his device intently. Based on their communication patterns, they're implementing the backup plan immediately. Whatever assets they have at the hospital are probably moving into position right now. Richardson spoke rapidly into his radio. Control, we need immediate evacuation protocols for Prince Louis at St. Mary's Hospital. Treat this as an active, credible terrorist threat. I also need backup teams deployed to the hospital immediately. Richardson, that's going to create a major incident. Are you certain about this intelligence? Came the reply. Richardson looked at the bomb disposal experts who were still working to disarm the device that would have killed Prince Louis if Sullivan hadn't intervened. Control, we have confirmed explosive device at the first attack site. This agent's intelligence has proven accurate. We cannot take chances with Prince Louis's safety. Sullivan was now monitoring what appeared to be real-time positioning data from the hospital area. I'm seeing movement patterns consistent with people taking up tactical positions around the hospital. This isn't random, they're implementing a coordinated operation. Richardson realized that evacuating Prince Louis from the hospital might actually be playing into the terrorists' hands. If they had positioned people around the building, the evacuation itself could be the moment when Prince Louis would be most vulnerable. But, keeping him inside a building that might be targeted for attack was equally dangerous. What do you recommend? Richardson asked Sullivan. Evacuation could expose Prince Louis to attack during transport, but staying could mean he's trapped if they have the building surrounded. Sullivan was now coordinating through his own communication channels with what appeared to be a sophisticated support network. My team is analyzing the tactical situation. We think the best approach is to reinforce Prince Louis's current position while we neutralize the threats around the perimeter. Your team? Richardson asked. I thought you were working alone. I was alone for the surveillance phase, but once we confirmed active terrorist operations, my full support team activated, Sullivan explained. We have assets moving into position around the hospital right now. Richardson was beginning to understand that he had stumbled into a major international counter-terrorism operation that had been planned and coordinated at levels far above his normal security clearance. Sullivan wasn't just a lone agent, he was part of a large, well-equipped organization that had been tracking this terrorist network for months. The radio crackled with updates from Richardson's command center. Richardson, we have suspicious activity reported around St. Mary's Hospital. Multiple individuals in work clothes have been observed taking positions near exits and emergency routes. This matches the profile you described. Sullivan nodded grimly. They're implementing a classic containment strategy. If they can't kill Prince Louis with a bomb, they'll try to trap him in the hospital and either take him hostage or eliminate him during a chaotic evacuation. Richardson felt the weight of protecting not just Prince Louis but potentially hundreds of sick children and hospital staff who could become victims if this situation escalated into a full terrorist attack. The morning had started with a simple security patrol and had evolved into something that could determine the safety of the royal family and the security of the nation. Sullivan, I need to know exactly what capabilities your team has, Richardson said. If we're going to coordinate our response, I need to understand what resources we're working with. Sullivan paused in his monitoring to look directly at Richardson. Captain, what I'm about to tell you is classified at levels that require special clearance, but given the circumstances, you need to know. My team represents a joint operation between British, American, and European intelligence services. We've been tracking this terrorist network for over a year, and today's attack on Prince Louis was supposed to be the beginning of a coordinated campaign against royal families across Europe. The scope of the threat was much larger than Richardson had imagined. This wasn't just about protecting Prince Louis from a single attack, it was about preventing the start of a terrorist campaign that could destabilize European governments and potentially trigger widespread civil unrest. How many other attacks were planned? Richardson asked. At least 6 that we know of, Sullivan replied. Prince Louis was the first target because attacking him would generate maximum media attention and public outrage. That would set the stage for attacks on other royal family members and government officials across the continent. Richardson realized that his decision to trust Sullivan and prevent the bombing had potentially saved not just Prince Louis's life, but had disrupted a terrorist campaign that could have changed the course of European history. But the immediate threat to the young prince was still very real and very urgent. Sullivan's device began displaying what appeared to be a tactical map of the hospital and surrounding area. My team has identified at least 8 individuals in suspicious positions around the hospital perimeter. They're all carrying communication devices and appear to be coordinating their movements. Richardson could see that the red dots on Sullivan's map formed a pattern that would effectively seal off all normal exit routes from the hospital. If Prince Louis tried to leave through standard procedures, he would be walking directly into what appeared to be a carefully planned ambush.
"What's the plan?" Richardson asked.
Sullivan studied the tactical display carefully.
"We're going to have to go in and get him.
My team will handle the perimeter threats while your people secure an extraction route. But we need to move fast. Once they realize their people at the construction site have been captured, they'll know their entire operation is compromised."
Richardson spoke into his radio with new urgency. "Control, I need immediate deployment of our tactical response team to St. Mary's Hospital. We're going in to extract Prince Louis under active terrorist threat conditions."
This is not a drill. As police and security forces began converging on the hospital from multiple directions, Richardson and Sullivan prepared for what would likely be the most dangerous phase of their efforts to protect Prince Louis. The 5-year-old prince was currently surrounded by sick children who adored him, completely unaware that his life was in immediate danger and that dozens of highly trained professionals were risking their own lives to keep him safe. The success or failure of the next hour would determine whether Prince Louis continued his scheduled visit to bring joy to hospitalized children, or whether his visit became the site of a terrorist attack that could change British society forever. The tactical situation at St. Mary's Hospital was complex and dangerous. Richardson and Sullivan arrived to find the building surrounded by what appeared to be normal city activity: delivery trucks, maintenance workers, and pedestrians going about their daily business. But Richardson now understood that many of these seemingly innocent people were actually terrorists positioned to capture or kill Prince Louis. Sullivan's team had set up a command center in a mobile unit disguised as a telecommunications repair truck. Richardson was amazed by the sophistication of their equipment and the level of coordination they had achieved in such a short time. Multiple screens showed real-time surveillance of the hospital and surrounding area, with red dots marking confirmed terrorist positions. "Captain Richardson," said a woman who introduced herself as Agent Sarah Collins, Sullivan's team leader, "we need your help with the extraction. Your people know the internal layout of royal protection procedures, and Prince Louis will trust familiar faces if we need to move him quickly." Richardson studied the tactical displays showing the positions of terrorists around the hospital perimeter. "What's our best extraction route?" Sullivan pointed to a service entrance on the hospital's east side. "My team has neutralized 2 terrorist positions along this corridor. We can get Prince Louis out through the kitchen loading dock, but we need to do it before they realize their perimeter has been compromised." Richardson contacted his command center for an update on Prince Louis's current situation. "Control, what's the prince's exact location within the hospital?" "He's in the pediatric cancer ward on the 3rd floor, came the reply. He's currently reading stories to a group of young patients in the play area. His protection detail reports no unusual activity inside the hospital." Richardson realized that Prince Louis was not only in potential danger from the terrorists outside, but that any rescue operation would have to be conducted without alarming the sick children who were enjoying what might be their only chance to spend time with a member of the royal family. Agent Collins showed Richardson detailed building schematics that her team had somehow obtained. "We can use this service elevator to move Prince Louis down to the loading dock level without passing through any public areas. The key is making sure he leaves the pediatric ward without causing panic among the children or staff." Sullivan was monitoring communications between the terrorists positioned around the hospital. "They're getting impatient. Someone just gave orders to move to phase 2 of their operation. We need to extract Prince Louis now, before they escalate to more aggressive tactics." Richardson spoke into his radio to contact Prince Louis's personal protection officer directly.
Agent Matthews, this is Captain Richardson with emergency protocol authorization. You need to immediately prepare Prince Louis for discreet departure. We have confirmed hostile assets in the area.
The response was immediate and professional.
Copy, Captain Richardson. How do you want to handle the extraction?
Tell Prince Louis that there's a special surprise waiting for him in another part of the hospital, Richardson instructed. Make it sound exciting rather than concerning. We need him to leave the pediatric ward quietly and happily. Through the hospital's internal security cameras, which Sullivan's team had somehow accessed, Richardson could watch as Agent Matthews approached Prince Louis. The 5-year-old was sitting cross-legged on a colorful carpet, surrounded by children in wheelchairs and hospital beds, completely absorbed in reading a story about a brave knight rescuing a dragon. Your Royal Highness, Agent Matthews said quietly, there are some very special children in another part of the hospital who have been hoping to meet you.
Would you like to go visit them now? Prince Louis looked up with bright eyes.
Of course.
Can I bring my magic tricks to show them too?
Absolutely, Matthews replied, helping the young prince gather his small bag of tricks and toys. But, we need to use a special elevator so we don't disturb other patients who might be sleeping. Richardson watched with admiration as Matthews guided Prince Louis away from the pediatric ward without causing any concern among the children or hospital staff. The prince was chattering excitedly about the new children he was going to meet, completely unaware that his life was in danger and that dozens of people were working frantically to keep him safe. Sullivan's team was now reporting that the terrorists outside were becoming more agitated. They're starting to question why their people at the construction site aren't responding to communications, Sullivan reported. We probably have less than 10 minutes before they realize their entire operation has been compromised. Agent Matthews and Prince Louis had reached the service elevator and were descending toward the loading dock level. Richardson could see through the security cameras that the prince was still completely relaxed and happy, asking questions about the hospital and the children he was about to meet. Phase 2 is now active, Sullivan announced, monitoring terrorist communications.
They've given orders for immediate action. Whatever they were planning to do as a backup, it's happening right now.
Richardson's radio crackled with urgent updates from teams positioned around the hospital.
Captain, we have movement from multiple suspects.
They're abandoning concealed positions and moving toward the hospital entrances. The terrorists had apparently decided that their window of opportunity was closing and were now taking direct action to get inside the hospital where Prince Louis was supposed to be located. But, thanks to the extraction operation, Prince Louis was no longer in the pediatric ward where they expected to find him.
Loading dock is clear, Agent Collins reported.
Extraction vehicle is in position and ready for immediate departure. Richardson watched through the security monitors as Agent Matthews led Prince Louis through a service corridor toward the loading dock. The prince was still completely cheerful, occasionally skipping as he walked and asking if the children he was going to visit liked magic tricks.
Suddenly, alarms began sounding throughout the hospital.
The terrorists had breached the main entrance and were demanding access to the pediatric ward. Hospital security was trying to manage the situation, but Richardson could see that the terrorists were armed and becoming increasingly desperate as they realized Prince Louis wasn't where they expected him to be.
Go, go, go.
Agent Collins commanded into her radio. Agent Matthews scooped up Prince Louis and ran the final distance to the loading dock, where a reinforced vehicle waited with its engine running. The prince laughed with delight, apparently thinking this was all part of an exciting adventure.
Where are we going now? Prince Louis asked as Matthews secured him in the specially designed safety seat. We're going to visit some children at a different hospital, Matthews explained.
And then, we'll go home so you can tell your parents about all the wonderful children you met today. The extraction vehicle pulled away from the hospital just as armed police units were moving in to confront the terrorists who had breached the building. Richardson felt a tremendous sense of relief as he watched Prince Louis's vehicle disappear safely into traffic, escorted by unmarked security cars. Sullivan was now coordinating the final phase of the operation, capturing the remaining terrorists who were trapped inside the hospital.
All perimeter positions have been secured, he reported. The suspects inside the building have nowhere to go.
Richardson watched through security monitors as police tactical teams systematically cleared the hospital, room by room, capturing the remaining terrorists. The operation was conducted with precision that minimized disruption to patients and staff, though the pediatric ward had to be temporarily evacuated as a precaution. Within 2 hours, all known members of the terrorist cell had been captured or confirmed neutralized. The explosive device in the delivery truck had been safely disarmed, and Prince Louis was secure at an undisclosed location, still believing he had simply had a very exciting day visiting sick children. Agent Collins approached Richardson as the operation concluded. "Captain, I want you to know that your decision to trust Agent Sullivan this morning likely prevented one of the most devastating terrorist attacks in British history.
Prince Louis would have been killed, along with dozens of innocent people."
Richardson thought about the 5-year-old prince, who had spent his morning bringing joy to sick children and was probably now at home telling his parents about his adventures, completely unaware of how many people had risked their lives to protect him.
"What happens to the captured terrorists?" Richardson asked.
"They'll be interrogated by joint intelligence teams," Sullivan replied. "The information they provide will help us identify and prevent other planned attacks across Europe."
Today's operation didn't just save Prince Louis, it probably prevented an entire campaign of terrorist attacks.
As Richardson finally ended his duty shift that evening, he reflected on how a routine security patrol had turned into one of the most significant counter-terrorism operations in recent history. Prince Louis was safe, a major terrorist network had been dismantled, and countless other lives had been saved through the prevention of future attacks.
The next morning, Prince Louis would probably wake up and ask if he could visit more children in hospitals. He would never know that his simple desire to bring happiness to sick children had made him a target for terrorists, or that his safety had been protected by the coordinated efforts of dozens of dedicated professionals who had put his life ahead of their own. Richardson returned to his normal duties, but he would never forget the morning when trusting a suspicious stranger had led to saving not just Prince Louis, but potentially changing the course of history by preventing a terrorist campaign that could have destabilized Europe. Sometimes the most important decisions in life come down to split-second judgments about whether to trust someone whose story seems too extraordinary to believe.